Hello there. The Kazon were the Klingon wannabes that held Voyager to ransom many times and were the bane of their existence upon their initial arrival in the Delta Quadrant, thanks to the caretaker entity dragging the ship there against its will in the late 24th century. Although a technologically not very sophisticated species, they were very well travelled and extremely aggressive, and although not an overly united people, they worked together when they needed to, particularly against a superior enemy, such as the Federation Starfleet, but also when they wanted to, get resources together. The Kazon in general did seem to have an innate desire to work together, as we saw when Janeway almost managed to unite the sects once, and they had united against the common enemy, the Trabe, but generally speaking, they were divided, very warlike people who had no right to be as powerful as they first seemed, but yet they really were. And one of the things that allowed them to power project so effectively was the eponymous Kazon Raider, but not the big one. That's already covered, I believe, previously on this channel. This is about the Kazon Fighter, which, although very likely an original Trabe design, in fact we know it was because the Trabe were also seen to use this design. The only ship the Trabe were not specifically seen to utilize was the larger, heavier Kazon Raiders. These ships appear, at least superficially, to be an original Kazon design. They are an upgunned, upsized version of the fighter, but the fighter itself is an original Trabe ship, but the Trabe considered them to be a shuttle. The Kazon made generous modifications to all the ships that they captured from the Trabe, which included, most notably, upgunning and upshielding the ships. The Trabe version was only ever seen to utilize the Kazon disruptors, or the same weapons rather the Kazon used, but it was never seen to utilize any kind of spatial charges, whereas the Kazon fighter was. It's also reasonable to conclude that the Kazon fighter may have been a little faster and better shielded than its Trabe cousin. The Kazon fighter could be operated by a single pilot, sometimes a single pilot as young as the age of 12, as we saw with Ka. Although these craft were armed with disruptors and spatial charges and had limited shields and a limited warp capability, they were no match for a single Starfleet shuttle, whose shields it couldn't even dent, at least not significantly, and it couldn't take even more than a couple of hits from the phasers when the Starfleet ship wasn't even trying to destroy the vessel. Bear in mind, Kazon technology is probably more comparable to Starfleet's a couple of centuries earlier, with only certain areas of Kazon technology being modified or improved upon by the Kazon either stealing, trading, or potentially a little bit of developing technology. I know the Kazon have a reputation for being kinda stupid, but as I've said before in previous videos, we underestimate the Kazon. They are more sophisticated as a people than we give them credit for. We have to bear in mind that they were one slave race to the Trabe, yes, but what did the Trabe use them for? There's a reason the Kazon were able to use these ships in the first place. Either the Kazon were a slightly more technologically sophisticated race in the first place when the Trabe met them, and they simply are just degenerates and they're violent, but so are Klingons in a lot of ways, or the Trabe taught them because the Trabe wanted them to pilot their ships. They wanted them to serve on their ships as mechanics and technicians. They probably wanted them to help build the damn things. So, in all likelihood, the Kazon had a reasonably good working knowledge of their technology. Maybe not a full appreciation of it on the same level as its original creators, but the fact that they were able to build the larger Kazon Raider, build new ships in general, indicates they could. Also, we see when the Kazon were aboard Voyager, they were quite adaptable, surprisingly intelligent and smart, and were able to adapt to Federation systems and even repair and maintain technology from a species far, far in advance of their own, although albeit with help from Seska and probably a lot of help from the ship's computer once they hacked it. But they were still able to do it, with some of them demonstrating a good working knowledge of warp mechanics and engineering. This small vessel was seen numerous times engaging Voyager and each other and generally anything else across the Delta Quadrant. Each Kazon Raider, and particularly the larger Predator class vessels, carried large numbers of these small vessels. They were great utility ships as both a shuttle, a transport, and a fighter. They were not particularly good to operate on their own, although they were often sent out as training vessels for young Kazon warriors to cut their teeth with, against opponents that were considered easy enough targets. Although it was seen again that a single shuttle could engage them, this meant that the Kazon were realistically just underestimating a Starfleet shuttle and just how less advanced they were than humanity at that time. This small vessel, though, was still a very impressive design, although I should again stipulate it was not a Kazon design, it was a Trabe design. It was a very impressive and very functional and quite nice little ship. It differed in some basic, obvious areas to the larger cousin, the Heavy Raider, but it did have the basic same silhouette with the little fins, with the engine mounts. The front of the ship had less detailing and was more just armor paneling with a small visible cockpit section with actual windows, unlike the larger Raiders. It still had the sort of drop snout design that the Raiders had, which, by the way, I've always thought was a weird addition to these ships. How the hell do they land? They'd have to land kind of buckled, or they'd have to be supported, or land in a little trench, or maybe the thing recoils. Who knows? And what the hell it does, again, who knows? It was probably something to do with sensors and deflectors, but I am guessing there. And again, I'm only doing this because I really like the Kazon, and it's my channel. I like to cover the Kazon. I like their ships, I really do, and I know technically they're Trabe, and the Kazon are dumb, and the Kazon are Klingon wannabes, and they were never the most popular villain, but seriously, if you go back and rewatch Voyager, you'll find that actually some of the most compelling storylines in Voyager in those early seasons often involved the Kazon in one form or another. They were good enough to even bring back in Prodigy recently. I really like them. Not as much as Klingons. I do agree they're kind of Klingon wannabes, but they're still cool. I don't care. I'm doing a video on them. Like, share, and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments below your opinion on the Kazon. Were they as dumb? Or would you give them a chance and go back and rewatch Voyager and not skip their episodes, because I know some of you do, and actually give them a chance? I'd just like to say a thank you to everyone for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy making these. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving a like, share, and a subscribe, and maybe checking out the other videos on the screen right now, and in the description box below there are links to my other social media accounts.